The biting October air was a welcome shock against Julian Thorne's meticulously curated warmth. He loosened the silk bow tie, the fabric a soft whisper against his throat, and stepped onto the cantilevered glass balcony. Below, the city sprawled like a circuit board of pulsing light, a kingdom he had largely conquered, yet tonight it felt distant, impersonal. The drone of the charity gala inside, the clinking of crystal, the polite laughter, the self-congratulatory speeches faded into a dull hum. He leaned against the railing, the cold seeping through the bespoke wool of his tuxedo jacket. It was in this moment of quiet solitude that he felt the tug, a small, insistent pull on the hem of his trousers. Julian glanced down, his first thought a flicker of annoyance at a clumsy waiter or an overzealous guest. But it was neither. Standing beside him, barely reaching his waist, was a little girl. Her blonde hair was so pale it was almost white in the reflected glow of the city, cut into a neat, unchildlike bob. Her dress was simple gray cotton, impossibly out of place amidst the diamonds and designer gowns. Her eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were fixed on his with an unnerving gravity. Before he could summon a security guard, before he could even form a question, she spoke, her voice a low, urgent whisper that cut through the night air. "You have to run." He stared, bewildered. He opened his mouth to dismiss her, to ask where her parents were, but she spoke again, her small hand now gripping his trousers like a vice. "They're coming for you. They know about the box, the one with the false bottom." Julian's blood ran cold. The breath hitched in his chest. No one knew about that box. No one. It was a relic from his childhood, a mahogany puzzle box his grandfather had given him, hidden away in the back of his personal vault for over 2 decades. He hadn't spoken of it, hadn't seen it himself in years. It was a ghost, a secret known only to him. The girl's blue eyes held his, devoid of any childish mischief. They were the eyes of a harbinger. "Run," she repeated, her voice barely audible, and then she let go, melting back into the shadows of the doorway as if she were made of smoke, leaving Julian Thorne, a man who feared nothing, frozen in a state of pure, primal terror. The security detail found him minutes later, still standing motionless, his knuckles white where he gripped the railing. "Mr. Thorne, is everything all right, sir?" Marcus, his head of security, was a monolith of a man, his professionalism a comforting and familiar wall. But tonight, that wall felt like paper. Julian turned slowly, his gaze sweeping the crowded ballroom, searching for a flash of pale blonde hair, a simple gray dress. There was nothing, just the sea of oblivious elites. "There was a girl," Julian said, his voice sounding hollow to his own ears. "Out here. Did you see her?" Marcus's brow furrowed. "A child, sir? No. No one came through the designated entry points who wasn't on the list. The staff children are in the supervised wing on the 3rd floor." He spoke with calm certainty, the kind Julian paid a fortune for. But it did nothing to quell the icy dread coiling in his stomach. "Check the surveillance footage. Now." Back in the penthouse suite he kept at the hotel for such events, Julian paced the plush carpet like a caged animal. The city lights, once a symbol of his power, now seemed like a million indifferent eyes watching him. The box. The one with the false bottom. His mind raced, tumbling back through the years to a dusty attic in his family's old estate. He was 10 years old. His grandfather, a man with a penchant for secrets and whiskey, had pressed the heavy box into his hands. "Every man needs a place to keep things, Julian," he'd rasped, his voice thick with secrets of his own. "Not treasures, not money, the things that truly matter, the things that can undo you." Julian had found the false bottom by accident a week later, a tiny, almost invisible seam along the velvet lining. Inside, there was nothing. He'd used it to store worthless childhood trinkets, a lucky marble, a faded photograph of his mother, a letter he'd written to his future self. As a teenager, he'd used it to hide love notes and, later, a flask. When he'd moved out, the box had gone into storage and eventually into the climate-controlled security of his personal vault, a forgotten relic of a life he'd long since shed. Who could possibly know about it? And why would they use a child, a ghost of a girl, to deliver the message? Marcus returned an hour later, his expression grim. He held a tablet, the screen glowing. "We have something, sir. It's unusual." He tapped the screen. The footage was from the balcony's security camera, a high-angle shot. It showed Julian stepping out, the city lights glinting off his polished shoes. Then, for a fraction of a second, the image flickered, a burst of digital static. When the picture reformed, the little girl was there, standing beside him. There was no entrance, no fade-in. She was simply there. And then she was gone. Another flicker of static marking her departure. "It's a glitch," Marcus said, though he didn't sound convinced. "A data corruption. It must be." Julian took the tablet, his fingers trembling slightly. He zoomed in on the girl's face. The resolution was grainy, but her expression was perfectly clear. It was solemn, urgent. This was no glitch. This was a message. "Who are they?" he whispered to the empty room. For the first time since he was a penniless orphan clawing his way out of the gutter, Julian Thorne felt the cold, sharp sting of fear. The world he had built with brutal efficiency, a fortress of wealth and influence, suddenly felt terrifyingly fragile. Every rival, every disgruntled ex-employee, every corporate entity he had crushed on his ascent, they all paraded through his mind, faceless threats in the dark. But this felt different. This felt personal. The box was from his past, a past he had worked tirelessly to bury. The warning was for his future, a future that was now shrouded in an ominous fog. He didn't sleep. Instead, he drove himself back to his sterile, minimalist penthouse overlooking the park. The space, usually a sanctuary of calm and order, felt like a glass cage. He dismissed his staff, needing the silence. In the center of his vast living room, he stared at a blank wall, replaying the encounter, the girl's words echoing in his mind. "They know about the box." It was a key, a clue. But to what door? He spent the next 48 hours in a self-imposed prison of paranoia and frantic research. He tore through his own life with the same ruthless precision he applied to his business acquisitions. He had his security team, a small army of former intelligence agents and special forces operatives, run deep-level background checks on every single person on the guest list for the gala, every staff member, every vendor. He had them analyze the security footage from every angle, searching for any trace of the girl, any accomplice, any clue. They found nothing. She was an apparition, a phantom who had breached the most secure layers of his life to deliver a cryptic warning. He cross-referenced financial records, corporate espionage reports, and old legal battles, searching for a name, a motive, a connection to a mahogany box from his childhood. The search was a descent into a rabbit hole of his own making, each new piece of information only deepening the mystery. He found a litany of enemies, a veritable who's who of people who would gladly see him fall, but none of it connected. The threats were always about money, about power, about market share. They were predictable, manageable. This was something else entirely. This felt like a ghost story, and Julian Thorne did not believe in ghosts. On the third day, a thought struck him, a memory he hadn't dredged up in years. The box wasn't just a hiding place. There was something else his grandfather had said. "It holds the things that can undo you." At the time, he'd thought it was just the old man being dramatic. Now the words felt like a prophecy. What if something was in the box, something he'd put there and forgotten, something someone else wanted? The idea was preposterous. What could a 10-year-old boy have hidden that would be of any value decades later? It was a fool's errand, a desperate grasp at a tangible clue in a sea of abstraction, but it was all he had. He called Marcus. "Prep the vehicle. We're going to the facility." The Thorn Private Archival Facility was a bland, windowless monolith in a remote industrial park, a concrete fortress that held the physical and digital skeletons of his empire. It was also where he kept his personal vault. Inside, under the hum of climate control and the silent watch of pressure plates and laser grids, Julian stood before the gleaming chrome door of Vault 7. He went through the multi-layered security protocols: retinal scan, voice print, PIN code, and finally, a physical key. The heavy door swung open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing shelves of priceless art, locked hard drives, and legal documents. In the very back, on a shelf dedicated to personal effects, sat the mahogany box. It was smaller than he remembered, the wood dark with age. He ran his fingers over the intricate carvings on the lid, the familiar feel of it sending a strange jolt through him. He carried it to a sterile white table in the center of the room and sat down, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He opened the lid. The red velvet interior was faded. Inside were the pathetic relics of his youth: the cloudy marble, the creased photograph of his mother smiling a sad, distant smile, the letter to his future self, the ink now a faint brown. He took them out one by one, his hands feeling clumsy and large. Then he ran his thumbnail along the back edge of the lining, searching for the seam. It took him a moment to find it. He pried it open. The false bottom lifted, revealing the shallow, hidden compartment beneath. It was empty. Of course it was empty. A wave of frustrated disappointment washed over him. What had he expected to find? A treasure map? The secret to his own undoing. It was just an old box. He was about to close it when his fingers brushed against something rough, something stuck to the velvet of the hidden compartment's floor. He leaned closer, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. It was a small piece of paper, no bigger than a postage stamp, yellowed with age. It had been taped to the bottom, the adhesive long since dried, leaving a faint dark stain. On it, in the spidery, barely legible handwriting of a child, were 2 words: Blackwood Grove. Julian stared at the words, a forgotten language from a distant past. Blackwood Grove. It wasn't a place. It was a ghost. It was the name of the orphanage where he had spent the first 6 years of his life, a grim, underfunded institution on the forgotten edge of the city. He hadn't thought of that name, hadn't allowed himself to think of it in 30 years. He had been adopted by the Thorns, a wealthy but childless couple, and his life had been irrevocably split into a before and an after. He had shed the skin of the unwanted orphan and become Julian Thorn, heir to a fortune. He had erased every trace of his former life, burning the scant records, never speaking of it, pretending it had never happened. Blackwood Grove was a locked room in the sprawling mansion of his memory, a room he never, ever entered. And now, a ghost girl had appeared on his balcony and led him back to its very door. Coincidence was a concept Julian didn't trust. It was a lazy explanation for patterns one was too blind to see. The girl, the box, the name of the orphanage, they were all connected. The threat wasn't against Julian Thorn, the billionaire. It was against the boy he once was, the boy who lived at Blackwood Grove. He left the vault, leaving the box and its childish contents on the table. He had what he needed. Back in his car, speeding through the city, the name echoed in his mind. Blackwood Grove. Why would he have written it down? Why would he have hidden it? What secret did that wretched place hold? His investigation shifted focus with brutal intensity. He was no longer looking for corporate spies or jealous rivals. He was digging up a grave, his own. He hired a team of private investigators, genealogists, and historical researchers, commanding them to find everything they could about the orphanage. Records were scarce. A fire in the late 90s had destroyed most of the city archives, and the orphanage itself had been demolished over a decade ago, replaced by a soulless logistics warehouse. It was a digital and physical dead end. But Julian had resources that transcended public records. He had money, and money could buy memories. He tasked his investigators with finding anyone, former staff, former residents, who had been at Blackwood Grove during the years he was there. It was a painstaking process, chasing down ghosts scattered across the country. Their names changed, their lives moved on. While his team worked, Julian found himself unable to focus on his business. The numbers on his screens seemed meaningless. Multi-billion-dollar deals felt trivial. He was haunted. The girl's face swam in his vision when he closed his eyes. He started seeing her everywhere, a flash of blonde hair in a crowd, a small figure in a gray dress at the far end of a street. He knew it was his mind playing tricks on him, but the feeling of being watched, of being warned, was constant. He was a man accustomed to being in control, to having all the variables accounted for. Now he was a character in a story he didn't understand, a puppet whose strings were being pulled by an unseen hand. A week later, his lead investigator, a former MI6 agent named Elias Vance, called him. "We found someone," Elias said, his voice crisp over the encrypted line. "A nurse. Her name is Clara Bellwether. She worked at Blackwood Grove from 1985 to 1995. She's in a long-term care facility in Northwood, about 2 hours from the city. Her memory is intermittent, according to the staff, but she was there the entire time you were." Northwood. The name was as drab and forgotten as the institution it housed. Julian felt a strange mix of apprehension and anticipation. This was it, the first tangible link to his past. "I'll go alone," Julian said, cutting off Marcus's inevitable offer of a security detail. This was a journey he had to take by himself. The Northwood Pines Care Facility smelled of antiseptic and despair. It was a world away from the gleaming towers and manicured parks he inhabited. Here, life was lived in faded floral armchairs and dimly lit hallways. Clara Bellwether was a frail woman, lost in a sea of beige blankets in a room that overlooked a dying garden. Her eyes, clouded with age, held a flicker of something when Julian introduced himself, but it wasn't recognition. He didn't use the name Thorne. He used the name he'd been given at the orphanage, Julian Ash. "Blackwood Grove," he said softly, sitting in the plastic visitor's chair beside her bed. "I was a resident there, a long time ago." He watched her face for any reaction, any sign. For a long time she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the gray sky outside. He was about to give up, to dismiss this as another dead end, when she spoke, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "The Grove," she whispered. Such a pretty name for such a sad place. Her eyes shifted, focusing on him for the first time. They were a watery blue, but for a moment they seemed to clear, to see something beyond the present. "I remember the children. So many children, like little ghosts." Julian leaned forward, his heart quickening. "Do you remember me? Julian Ash?" She squinted, studying his face. "Ash. Yes. The quiet boy. The one who drew pictures in the dirt. You had sad eyes." A memory, faint and fleeting, surfaced in Julian's mind. The feeling of rough grit under his fingernails, tracing patterns in the dusty playground. "There was another one," Clara continued, her voice drifting. "A girl. She came after you. Looked a bit like you, I always thought. Same quiet way about her. always watching. A girl? Julian pressed. What was her name? Clara's brow furrowed in concentration. So many names. They blur. It started with an E. Ella? No. Elara. That was it. Elara. The name meant nothing to him. Did she have family? Was she adopted? Oh, no, dear, Clara said, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. Not her. She was one of the others. The ones who stayed. What do you mean, the ones who stayed? The Grove wasn't just for orphans, she whispered, her voice dropping as if sharing a secret. It was a place for inconvenient children, children of wealthy families, the ones they needed to hide. Illegitimate, unwell, embarrassing. They were kept separate, in the West Wing. We weren't supposed to talk to them. Their parents paid a great deal for the silence. A cold dread, more profound than anything he'd felt on the balcony, began to seep into Julian's bones. The West Wing. He remembered it as a forbidden place, a section of the old building with boarded-up windows that the other children whispered about, telling ghost stories about the children who lived there. This girl, Elara, Julian said, his voice tight. Did you know what happened to her? Clara's gaze drifted back to the window. The clarity was gone. They took her away, she murmured. Like the others. One day they were just gone. A car would come in the night. No goodbyes. The beds would be empty in the morning. He tried to ask more, but she had retreated back into the fog of her memories, humming a tuneless, forgotten lullaby. He left the care facility with a single name, Elara, and a chilling new understanding of Blackwood Grove. It wasn't just an orphanage. It was a warehouse for secrets. His secret somehow was tied to it. The name on the paper in his box was a breadcrumb, a clue left by his younger self. Had he known this Elara? Was she the reason he'd hidden the name of that place? Driving back to the city, the sterile luxury of his car felt alien. He was straddling two worlds, the polished, predictable present, and the murky, terrifying past that was clawing its way back to him. Elara. The name was a ghost on his tongue. He tasked Elias with a new search, a seemingly impossible one. Find a girl named Elara who was a resident of the Blackwood Grove Orphanage's West Wing some 30 years ago, a girl who officially never existed. While the search for Elara commenced, Julian found himself drawn to the physical location of the old orphanage. The logistics warehouse that now stood in its place was a vast, ugly cube of corrugated metal. He parked across the street, watching trucks rumble in and out, a constant, soulless stream of commerce. There was nothing left of the past. No trace of the crumbling brick, the dusty playground, the iron gates that had once imprisoned him. But as he sat there, staring at the spot where his life began, he felt it again, the unnerving sensation of being watched. He scanned the area, his eyes sharp, trained to notice details. He saw nothing out of the ordinary. And then, he saw her. She was standing at the edge of the industrial park, half hidden behind a chain-link fence. The same pale blonde hair, the same simple gray dress. It was the girl from the balcony. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was real. She wasn't a hallucination or a glitch in a security feed. He threw the car door open, ignoring the blare of a horn from a passing truck. "Hey!" he shouted, starting towards her. She didn't run. She just watched him approach, her expression unreadable. As he got closer, he could see she was thin, her face smudged with a bit of dirt, but her blue eyes were as clear and intense as he remembered. He stopped a few feet away, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. "How do you know me?" The girl didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head, her gaze shifting to the warehouse behind him. "It hurts here," she said, her voice small but clear. "A lot of people were sad here." The simplicity of her words struck him with surprising force. Yes, he found himself agreeing. They were. He took another step closer. "The box," he said. "How did you know about the box?" "The lady told me," she said simply. "What lady?" "The sad lady. The one in the picture." Julian froze. "What picture?" "The one in the box," the girl said, her patience seemingly endless. "The one with the bent corner. Your mother." It was impossible. Utterly, completely impossible. The photograph of his mother, the one he'd kept in the false bottom of the box, had been in his vault. No one had seen it. No one could have described it to this child. He felt a wave of dizziness, the world tilting on its axis. He reached out to steady himself against the fence, his mind struggling to process the information. "Who are you?" he whispered, the question now a desperate plea. The girl finally looked at him, a flicker of something that might have been sympathy in her eyes. "My name is Lily," she said. And then, a security guard from the warehouse, seeing a man in an expensive suit talking to a lone child by the fence, started walking towards them, his hand on his radio. Lily's eyes darted towards the guard. Her brief moment of connection with Julian was broken. With a speed that was startling, she turned and darted away, disappearing into a maze of overgrown lots and abandoned industrial buildings that bordered the park. Julian started to go after her, but the guard intercepted him. "Everything okay here, sir?" The moment was lost. She was gone. But she had left him with two more pieces of the puzzle: her name, Lily, and a connection to his dead mother. The search for Alara had turned up nothing. It was as if she had been systematically erased from existence. But now Julian had a new name to search for: Lily. He deployed every resource at his command to find the little girl. He flooded the area around the industrial park with private investigators, showing her grainy photo from the security footage to everyone they could find. They canvassed homeless shelters, community centers, and schools. For days there was nothing. It was like trying to catch smoke. At the same time, he reopened the investigation into his mother's death. It had been ruled an accident, a tragic fall down the grand staircase of their family home when he was just 5 years old. His adoptive father, Richard Thorne, had been devastated. Julian's own memories of the event were hazy, disjointed fragments of shouting, a crash, and then a profound, terrifying silence. He'd never questioned the official story. Now he questioned everything. He hired a forensic accounting team to dig into his family's finances from that period, looking for anomalies, for anything that didn't fit the narrative of a happy, wealthy family struck by tragedy. The pieces were disparate, spread across time and space. A ghost girl named Lily, a forgotten orphanage, a hidden name, a long-dead mother, and an erased child named Alara. Julian felt like he was assembling a puzzle in the dark, his only guide the faint, whispering voice of the past. He was neglecting his company, his empire. Board meetings were missed, calls went unanswered. His life, once a monument to order and control, was in chaos. And yet he felt a strange sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. This was more important than any merger or acquisition. This was about the truth. One of his investigators finally got a lead. A woman running a soup kitchen a few miles from the industrial park recognized Lily's picture. "She comes in sometimes," the woman said. "Doesn't talk much. Comes with her grandmother, I think. An older woman, looks tired. They don't take much. Just some bread, some soup. They live somewhere in the Warrens, I'd guess." The Warrens. It was a sprawling, neglected neighborhood of crumbling tenement buildings and forgotten factories, a place the city had long since given up on. It was a pocket of deep poverty, a world away from Julian's penthouse. It was the last place on earth he would ever have expected his search to lead him. He went that night, again alone, against the strenuous objections of his security team. He drove his nondescript sedan, not his luxury sports car, and wore simple, dark clothing. As he entered the Warrens, the glittering skyline of his city vanished from the rearview mirror, replaced by shadowed alleyways and buildings that seemed to sag with the weight of neglect. He found the soup kitchen, a small beacon of light on a dark street. He parked nearby and waited, his gaze fixed on the entrance. He didn't know what he was expecting. For hours he watched people come and go, their faces etched with hardship. He felt a profound sense of dislocation, of being an intruder in a world he didn't understand and had actively ignored. Just as he was about to give up, he saw them. An elderly woman, her back stooped, her face a road map of worry, walked slowly out of the soup kitchen, and holding her hand, walking beside her with a solemn grace, was Lily. Julian's breath caught. He got out of the car, his movements slow, deliberate, not wanting to startle them. He approached them as they turned down a side street. "Lily?" he called out softly. The girl stopped, turning to look at him. There was no surprise in her eyes, only a quiet acceptance, as if she had been expecting him. Her grandmother, however, pulled Lily behind her, her body tensing with fear and suspicion. "What do you want?" the old woman demanded, her voice frail but fierce. "Stay away from us." "I just want to talk," Julian said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. "My name is Julian. I've met Lily before." The old woman's eyes narrowed. "We don't know any Julian. Leave us be." "Please," Julian said, his voice laced with a desperation that surprised him. He looked at Lily. "Your mother," he said, focusing on the girl. "You said the sad lady in the picture told you about the box." "My mother. How is that possible?" Lily looked up at her grandmother, a silent communication passing between them. The old woman's fierce expression softened slightly, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. She studied Julian's face, her gaze lingering on his eyes. "You have her eyes," the woman whispered, her voice cracking. "I haven't seen those eyes in 30 years. Julian stared at her, his mind reeling. "Who are you?" "My name is Annalise," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of a long-held secret. "And the woman in the photograph, she was my friend. I was her private nurse. I was there the night she died." The world seemed to stop. The grimy alley, the distant sirens, the chill in the air. It all faded away. This frail, elderly woman, living in poverty with a little girl who saw ghosts, held the key to the central tragedy of his life. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" Julian asked, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. Annalise's eyes filled with tears, which she quickly blinked away. She shook her head, a small, heartbreaking gesture. "No," she said. "It wasn't." She looked around the dark street, her fear returning. "We can't talk here. It's not safe." She looked at Julian, a long, calculating gaze, making a decision that had been decades in the making. "Come with us." She led him through a labyrinth of narrow streets to a run-down tenement building, the kind of place Julian's companies bought and demolished without a second thought. Their apartment was on the 4th floor, up a flight of stairs that creaked and groaned with every step. The space was small, sparsely furnished, but immaculately clean. A single lamp cast a warm yellow glow over the room. While Annalise made tea with trembling hands, Lily sat at a small wooden table, watching Julian with her unnervingly perceptive eyes. "You found us," she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "You told me to run," Julian replied, sitting opposite her. "I needed to know why." Annalise placed a steaming mug in front of him. She sat down heavily, the weight of her story pressing down on her. "Your mother," she began, her voice low and steady now. "Her name was Elena. She wasn't the woman everyone thought she was. She married into the Thorne family, into the wealth. But she never belonged. She had a kind heart, a gentle soul. Too gentle for that world. Too gentle for your father. She paused, taking a deep breath. Richard Thorne was a cruel man, charming on the outside, but underneath, he was cold, controlling. Elena was his possession, another beautiful object to display. When you were born, she poured all her love into you. You were her world, but she was trapped. He wouldn't let her leave. He told her if she tried, she would never see you again. Julian listened, his hands wrapped around the warm mug, the stories a stark contrast to the sanitized version of his parents' marriage he'd been fed his whole life. She had a plan, Annalise continued. She was saving money, making arrangements. She was going to take you and disappear. She had help, a friend from her past. But Richard found out. I was there. I heard them arguing, the shouting. It was terrible. He told her she would never get away, that he would rather see her dead. Annalise's voice broke. She stopped, composing herself. Lily reached out and placed her small hand on her grandmother's arm. Later that night, Annalise said, her voice a whisper, he came to her room. They argued again. I was in the hall. I heard a struggle, a scream. And then, the fall. By the time I got there, she was at the bottom of the stairs. He was standing at the top, looking down. There was no grief in his eyes, Julian, only satisfaction. He told the police she had been drinking, that she tripped. It was a lie. He killed her. He pushed her. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. The hazy, fragmented memories in Julian's mind began to sharpen, to coalesce around this new, horrific truth. The shouting, the crash, the silence, and the image of his father, standing at the top of the stairs, looking down. He had buried it, his child's mind unable to process the horror. But it was there. It had always been there. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Julian asked, his voice raw. "I tried," Annalise said, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I tried to tell them what I saw, what I heard. But I was just a nurse. He was Richard Thorne. He had the best lawyers, the most powerful friends. He paid off the right people. He threatened me. He told me if I ever spoke a word of it, he would destroy me. He said he would make sure I never worked again, that I would end up on the street. And he said he would take my daughter from me." She looked down at her hands. "I had a little girl then, my Rose. She was my whole life. I was a single mother. I was scared, so I kept quiet. But before I left, I took something. Evidence. Elena had kept a diary. She wrote everything down. His threats. Her plans to leave. I took it. I also took some financial documents she had found, proof that Richard was embezzling from his own company, hiding assets. She was going to use them to get custody of you. I kept them, thinking one day I might be brave enough." Julian's mind was spinning. His entire life, his identity as a Thorne, was built on a lie, a murder. "What happened to the evidence?" he asked. "Richard Thorne was a powerful man, and he was paranoid," Annalise said. "He had me followed. He knew I had taken something. I knew I couldn't keep the evidence with me. It was too dangerous. So I found a place to hide it. A place no one would ever think to look. A place tied to your mother's past, not mine." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "Your mother, Elena. She wasn't an orphan, as the story said. She had a sister. A younger sister she was forced to give up when their parents died. The sister was sent to a special home, a place for children with difficulties. Elena spent years trying to find her. Just before she died, she did. The girl was at Blackwood Grove." Julian felt the floor drop out from under him. "Elara. Her name was Elara," he breathed. Annalise nodded. "I went to the orphanage. I gave the box with the diary and the documents to the only person I knew I could trust to keep it safe, the only person Richard Thorne would never be able to find. I gave it to Ilara. The puzzle pieces crashed into place, forming a picture of unimaginable tragedy. Ilara was his aunt, the girl in the West Wing. He had been living in the same building as his own family and had never known. "What happened to her?" Julian asked. "I don't know," Annalise said sadly. "After I gave her the box, I lost track of her. I heard the West Wing was cleared out, the children sent away to other facilities. I tried to find her for years, but it was like she vanished. The evidence, your mother's story, it vanished with her." A heavy silence fell over the small room. 30 years of secrets finally laid bare. "But Lily," Julian said, looking at the little girl who had started it all. "How did she know? How did she know about the box, about my mother?" Annalise looked at her granddaughter with a mixture of awe and fear. "My daughter, Rose, passed away a few years ago," she said softly. "It's just been me and Lily since then. Lily is different. She sees things, feels things. She started talking about the sad lady a few months ago. She described your mother perfectly. She said the lady was scared, that she was worried about her son, that she needed him to know the truth." Lily drew a picture of the mahogany box, described the false bottom. She told me, "Grandma, we have to warn him." I thought she was imagining things, that it was a child's fantasy born from the sad stories I'd told her about my past. But she was so insistent. And then she saw your picture in a newspaper article about the gala. "That's him," she said. "That's the boy." I didn't believe her. I was too scared. But Lily, she has a brave heart. She slipped out that night. She found her way to you." Julian stared at the little girl, this impossible, intuitive child who had breached the walls of his fortress and his heart. She wasn't a ghost. She was a messenger, sent across the years by the mother he barely remembered. "Why now?" Julian asked, looking at Annalise. "After all these years, why is the warning coming now?" Annalise's face grew pale. "I don't know. But if Lily says you're in danger, I believe her. Richard Thorne may be dead, but the people he associated with, the secrets he kept, they don't just die. Someone must be looking for that evidence, someone who knows what was in it." The warning. You have to run. It wasn't just about the past, it was about the present. By finding Annalise, by unearthing the story of Ilara and the hidden evidence, he had triggered something. He had stumbled into a web that had been spun 30 years ago, and now the spider was stirring. He thought of the glitches in the security footage, of Lily's impossible appearance and disappearance. Had someone been watching him all along, manipulating events? Was it just a coincidence that he found Annalise, or was he led here? He stood up, the room feeling too small, too confining. "You're not safe here," he said, a new, fierce sense of responsibility settling over him. He looked at Annalise and Lily, a frail old woman and a little girl who had risked everything to warn him. They were bound to him now by a shared history and a shared danger. "Both of you, pack a bag, just the essentials. You're coming with me." For the first time, a small smile touched Lily's lips. "I told you, Grandma," she said softly. "He's the one who can help." Julian took them not to his penthouse, which he now considered compromised, but to a secure location, a high-tech safe house disguised as a bland suburban home that was owned by one of his shell corporations. As they settled in, a strange sense of domesticity filled the sterile environment. Lily explored the house with quiet curiosity, while Annalise seemed overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her reality. Julian, meanwhile, was a man galvanized, The fear and paranoia had been replaced by a cold, clear rage. His life had been stolen from him, his mother murdered, his family history a lie. Richard Thorne had taken everything, and now someone was trying to bury the truth forever. He now understood the stakes. The documents in that box weren't just about a 30-year-old murder. Richard Thorne had been a master of secrets and illicit dealings. The evidence of his embezzling was likely just the tip of the iceberg. Those documents could probably implicate some of the most powerful people in the city, people who were still in power today. They were the "they" in Lily's warning. They were the ones coming for him. His priority was to find that box. He had to find Alara. The search began anew, but this time it wasn't a cold case. It was a race against an unseen enemy. Elias and his team worked around the clock, using the new information from Annalise to focus their search. They scoured records of institutional transfers, looking for any mention of a Jane Doe matching Alara's description being moved from Blackwood Grove. Days turned into a week. Julian spent the time at the safe house, a bizarre and unfamiliar interlude in his life. He found himself talking to Lily, listening to her strange, insightful observations about the world. She spoke of his mother, Elena, as if she knew her, relaying feelings and memories that resonated with a deep, forgotten truth within him. She liked the color blue, Lily said one afternoon as they sat in the backyard, and the sound of rain. She used to sing you a song about a silver ship. A memory flickered in Julian's mind, a soft melody, a woman's voice. A memory so faint he had always dismissed it as a dream. He was also getting to know Annalise, listening to her stories about his mother, filling in the vast, empty spaces of his childhood. He was seeing his mother not as the tragic, porcelain figure in a photograph, but as a real woman, brave, loving, and defiant. He was learning about the life he was supposed to have, the love he had been denied. It was a painful, yet healing process. He also felt a growing protectiveness for this unlikely family he had acquired. He saw the years of fear and hardship in Annalise's eyes, the quiet resilience in Lily. He had the power to give them a safe and comfortable life, and the thought of failing them was now more terrifying than any threat to his business empire. Then, Elias called. "We have a potential match," he said, his voice tight with excitement. "It's a long shot, but the timeline fits." After Blackwood Grove's West Wing was shut down, several of the untraceable residents were moved to a state-run facility upstate, the Briarwood Institute. Most of them were wards of the state with no official records, but one of them, listed as Jane Doe Number 7, was later transferred to a private care home called the Willows. The transfer was paid for by an anonymous trust, a trust that was funded circuitously by a shell corporation linked to your grandfather, Arthur Thorne. Julian's breath caught. His grandfather, the man who gave him the box, the man who told him it was for things that could undo him. Had he known? Had he been trying to protect the evidence, to protect Alara from his own son? "Where is she now?" Julian demanded. "The Willows is a quiet place, more of a sanctuary than a hospital," Elias said. "For long-term residents with delicate emotional needs. She's still there. Her name is listed as Ilara Jean. She hasn't had a visitor in over 20 years. Julian knew what he had to do. He told Annalise and Lily to stay put, that he would be back soon. He could see the fear in Annalise's eyes. "Be careful, Julian," she warned. "You don't know who you're dealing with." He left Marcus and a team of his best men to guard the house and drove north, the city shrinking behind him. The Willows was nestled in a quiet, wooded valley, a beautiful, serene place that belied the sadness it housed. He was met by a doctor, a kind-faced woman who explained that Alara was fragile. She lived mostly in a world of her own making, a defense against a past that had been too cruel. She rarely spoke. He was led to a sunny room that looked out onto a garden. A woman was sitting by the window, her back to him. Her hair was streaked with gray, but he could see it had once been a dark brown, like his. She was painting, her hand moving slowly across a canvas. "Ilara?" he said softly. She didn't turn. He walked closer, his heart pounding. On the easel was a painting of a crumbling brick building with iron gates, Blackwood Grove. And in the foreground, a small boy and a slightly older girl were holding hands. He recognized the boy as himself. He looked at the woman. She turned her head slowly, and for the first time, he saw her face. Her features were delicate, and her eyes. Her eyes were a startlingly familiar shade of brown. They were his mother's eyes. They looked at him without recognition, clouded by years of trauma and isolation. "My name is Julian," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm Elena's son. I'm your nephew." He didn't know if the words registered. He knelt beside her chair. "I need your help, Ilara. A long time ago, a woman named Annalise gave you a box to keep safe. A mahogany box. It belonged to my mother. Do you remember?" He watched her face, searching for a flicker of understanding. Her gaze remained distant. He felt a surge of despair. He had come all this way, only to find another dead end. But then, her eyes shifted, moving from his face to the painting. She pointed a trembling, paint-stained finger at the small boy in the picture. "Julian," she whispered, the name a rusty key turning in a long locked door, and then she looked at him again, a glimmer of light in the fog. "The box," she said, her voice barely audible. "Safe. I kept it safe." She stood up, her movements stiff, and walked to a small, simple wardrobe in the corner of the room. She opened it. On the floor, tucked beneath a pile of folded blankets, was a mahogany box. It was the twin of the one in his vault. His grandfather had given them each a box, one for him, and one for the secret aunt he never knew he had. Ilara lifted it, her hands caressing the wood as if it were a sacred object, and held it out to him. He took it, the weight of it in his hands feeling immense, biblical. This was it. The truth. The story of his mother. The weapon that could bring down an empire of lies. He looked at Ilara, this woman who had been his silent, unknown guardian for 30 years, and his heart broke for the life she had lost. "Thank you," he whispered. As he turned to leave, her hand shot out, grabbing his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her eyes were suddenly clear, focused, the fog momentarily banished by a surge of urgent memory. "The owl," she said, her voice sharp, afraid. "Watch out for the owl. He sees everything." Before he could ask what she meant, the light in her eyes faded, and she retreated back into her silent world, leaving Julian with the box and a final, cryptic warning. He drove back to the safe house, the box on the passenger seat beside him like a ticking bomb. The owl. The name was absurd, theatrical, but Ilara's fear had been real. He called Elias, told him to run the name through every database he had, look for any connection to Richard Thorne, to his family, to his business. Inside the safe house, he gathered Annalise and Lily in the living room. With them as his witnesses, his newfound family, he opened the box. The contents were perfectly preserved. On top was his mother's diary, a small leather-bound book. He opened it, his hands trembling. Her handwriting was elegant, feminine. He read the first page, and then the next. And for the next hour, the story of his mother's last year of life unfolded. It was a harrowing tale of emotional abuse, of a woman fighting for her freedom and her child. It detailed Richard's cruelty, his threats, and her desperate plan to escape. The final entry, dated the day before she died, was a chilling premonition. "He knows. I saw it in his eyes tonight. If something happens to me, I pray someone finds this. I pray my Julian knows he was loved." Beneath the diary were the financial documents. They were far worse than Annalise had realized. Richard Thorne hadn't just been embezzling. He had been running a sophisticated money laundering operation for a criminal syndicate, using Thorne Industries as a front. The documents implicated not just him, but several high-ranking city officials, a federal judge, and a rival corporation that was now one of the largest in the world. It was a conspiracy of immense scale, and his mother had stumbled upon the proof. Her murder wasn't just an act of domestic violence. It was a calculated execution to protect a criminal enterprise. This was the secret they were willing to kill for. This was why they were now coming for him. The name of the rival corporation stood out. Alistair Finch, its CEO, had been Richard Thorne's closest friend and business partner. He was a man Julian had known his whole life, a man he considered an uncle, and according to these documents, he was at the very center of the criminal web. The phone rang, startling them. It was Elias. "We have a hit on the Owl," he said, his voice grim. "It's not a name, it's a moniker. For a fixer, a cleaner, a man who makes problems disappear for the rich and powerful. He's a ghost, no official records, but he's been linked to dozens of disappearances and accidents over the last 40 years. He worked almost exclusively for one client." Elias paused. "Richard Thorne, and after your father died, he went to work for Alistair Finch." Julian felt a chill run down his spine. The Owl was real, and he was working for the man who now knew Julian had the evidence to destroy him. How did they know? He thought of the glitches, of Lily's impossible appearances. Had he been watched from the very beginning? Had Finch been monitoring him, waiting to see if he would ever uncover the past? And when he got too close, had they decided to act? His paranoia solidified into a terrifying certainty. They weren't just watching him. They knew where he was. They had led him to the evidence, perhaps, wanting him to retrieve it so they could take it from him and eliminate the last remaining loose ends. Him, Annalise, Alara, and a little girl named Lily, all at once. "They're coming," Julian said, his voice low. He looked at Marcus, who had been standing silently in the corner of the room. "Lock us down. Full tactical alert." But it was too late. As Marcus spoke into his wrist communicator, the power to the house cut out, plunging them into darkness. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows. The sound of the gate being breached echoed from the front of the property, followed by the sickening thud of silenced weapons. Marcus's team, his elite guards, were being taken out. They were surrounded. Trapped. Marcus drew his weapon, his face a mask of grim determination. "Get them to the panic room," he ordered Julian. Julian grabbed Lily, and Annalise followed, her face pale with terror. They rushed down a hallway to a reinforced steel door hidden behind a bookshelf. But as Julian reached for the handle, a voice, calm and chillingly polite, echoed from the living room behind them. "Julian, there's no need for that. We can be civilized about this." Standing in the doorway, flanked by two men in dark tactical gear, was Alistair Finch. He looked older, his avuncular smile replaced by a cold, predatory expression. "It's been a long time, my boy," he said. "You've been quite a difficult man to pin down. Your father would be proud of your resourcefulness, but not your sentimentality." His eyes flickered to Annalise and Lily. "These attachments, they make you weak." "It was you," Julian said, his voice seething with a rage so profound it felt like it could burn the room down. "You helped him kill my mother." Alistair sighed, a theatrical display of regret. "Elena was a lovely woman, but she was naive. She was going to ruin everything, for all of us. Richard did what was necessary. And now, you forced my hand." He gestured towards the mahogany box which Julian had left on the table. "I'll take that. And then, we'll put this unfortunate chapter to rest. A tragic accident. A gas leak, perhaps. It's a shame. You, the old nurse who lost her mind, and the little stray she picked up. No one will ask any questions. One of Alistair's men started towards the table. Julian knew he had only seconds. He looked at Marcus, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He looked at Annalise, her eyes wide with fear, and he looked at Lily. She wasn't scared. She was looking at Alistair with her clear, unwavering gaze. In that moment, Julian knew what he had to do. He wasn't the boy from Blackwood Grove anymore. He was a thorn, yes, but he was also Elena's son, and he would not let her story die here. "Now, Marcus!" Julian yelled. The room erupted in chaos. Marcus opened fire, providing a split second of cover. Julian didn't run for the panic room. He ran for the box. He grabbed it, tucking it under his arm, and then, shoving Annalise and Lily behind him, he did the one thing they wouldn't expect. He smashed through the plate glass window of the living room, a shower of glass raining down around them. They landed on the soft grass of the backyard, the shock of the impact jarring them. Alarms blared. Shouts echoed from the house. Julian pulled Annalise and Lily to their feet. "Run!" he screamed, the girl's own words coming back to him. They sprinted across the manicured lawn towards the woods that bordered the property, the sounds of gunfire behind them. They were exposed, a desperate, impossible gamble. But as they reached the tree line, a dark sedan, its headlights off, screeched to a halt on the access road just beyond the fence. The door flew open. It was Elias. He had been their unseen backup, their last resort. They scrambled into the car, bullets pinging off the armored body panels. Elias slammed his foot on the accelerator, the car fishtailing before finding purchase, and they sped off into the night, leaving the safe house, now a war zone, behind them. As they drove, the city lights once again appearing on the horizon, Julian clutched the mahogany box to his chest. He looked at Annalise and Lily, huddled together in the back seat. They were safe, for now. He had the truth. But Alistair Finch and the ghosts of his father's past were still out there. The run wasn't over. It had just begun. In the aftermath, they were fugitives. Julian Thorne, a man whose face was a staple in financial news, was now a ghost, forced to live in the shadows. Elias used his network of contacts to secure them a series of anonymous, interchangeable apartments. They moved every few days, never staying in one place long enough to leave a trace. Julian, with the help of Elias and a small, loyal faction of his security team who had been off-site during the attack, began to fight back. He couldn't go to the police. Finch's influence ran too deep. He had to dismantle the empire of lies from the outside. He became a ghost in the machine he had once commanded. Using encrypted networks and his intimate knowledge of the financial world, he started to bleed Alistair Finch's company dry. He orchestrated anonymous stock market attacks, leaked damaging internal memos to ravenous journalists, and funneled evidence of smaller-scale corruption to international regulators, all while keeping the bombshell evidence from the box in reserve. It was a war of 1,000 cuts, fought in the digital ether. During this time, his bond with Lily and Annalise deepened. In the quiet moments between the chaos, they became a family. He read stories to Lily, helped Annalise with her crosswords, and listened to their stories. He was no longer just their protector. They were his anchor, his reason for fighting. He wasn't just avenging his mother's death. He was fighting for a future for them, a future free from the shadows of the past. Lily, with her strange intuition, was his compass. "The owl is close," she would say, and hours later, Elias would report a near miss, a sign they'd been tracked. She seemed to feel the ebb and flow of the danger around them, a human early warning system. The final confrontation came not in a boardroom or a dark alley, but in the court of public opinion. Julian, using a trusted journalistic contact, leaked the entire contents of his mother's diary and the financial documents to a consortium of international news organizations. He did it all at once. A massive, undeniable data dump. The story exploded. It was a scandal of epic proportions, implicating some of the most powerful figures in the country. Alistair Finch's empire crumbled overnight. His partners turned on him. His political allies abandoned him. The federal judge was impeached. The city officials were indicted. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable evidence and public outrage, the system was finally forced to act. Alistair Finch was arrested, trying to flee the country on his private jet. The last Julian saw of him was a photograph on a news site. A broken old man in handcuffs, his cold, predatory eyes finally defeated. The owl was never found. He vanished, a true ghost, leaving behind only whispers and a legacy of fear. With the truth revealed, Julian was able to reclaim his life. But he didn't go back to the way things were. The penthouse felt cold and empty. The endless pursuit of wealth seemed meaningless. He had changed. He sold a majority stake in his company, pouring billions into a new foundation named after his mother, Elena. Its mission was to fund child advocacy groups and support facilities for at-risk youth, ensuring there would be no more Blackwood Groves, no more lost children like Alara. He made sure Alara was moved to the best care facility in the country, and he visited her every week. He would sit with her for hours, telling her about his mother, about the world, about the family she had, in her own way, helped to save. Sometimes she would have moments of clarity, and she would smile, a flash of the woman she might have been. He bought a house, not a sterile mansion, but a warm, comfortable home with a large backyard. Annalise moved in with him, her days of fear and poverty finally over. And Lily, Lily was his daughter in every way that mattered. He adopted her, giving her the name, the safety, and the love she deserved. The story ends not with a corporate victory or a triumphant press conference, but with a quiet, ordinary moment. Julian is in the backyard, pushing Lily on a swing. She's laughing, her face tilted up towards the sun, the picture of a happy, carefree child. Annalise is sitting on the porch watching them, a peaceful smile on her face. Julian looks at them, at the family he never knew he needed, at the love he had found in the midst of chaos and danger. He had been told to run, and he had. He had run from a threat, he had run towards the truth, and in the end, he had run straight into the heart of a home. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, not by vengeance, but by love. And Julian Thorne, the boy who once had nothing, finally had everything that mattered.